Ernst Zimmermann ran his fingers across the smooth Bakelite case of the American field radio, feeling the precision of the molding, the perfect uniformity of the surface. 20 years as an electrical engineer before the war had taught him to recognize quality manufacturing when he saw it, and what he held in his hands was exceptional work. Too exceptional, impossibly exceptional for what was supposed to be a disposable piece of military equipment produced in wartime conditions. The warehouse around him was packed with captured American supplies, the result of a brief German counterattack that had overrun a forward supply dump before the inevitable American response pushed them back. Wooden crates were stacked floor to ceiling, containing everything from medical supplies to ammunition to communications equipment. Zimmermann's commanding officer had sent him to assess the American radio gear, to determine if any of it could be adapted for German use. But what he was discovering made that question seem absurdly irrelevant. "Herr Hauptmann, you should see this," called Feldwebel Karl Becker from across the warehouse. The senior NCO was standing beside an open crate, holding up another radio, identical to the one in Zimmermann's hands. "There must be 200 of these in here alone. All the same model. All brand new." Zimmermann walked over, his boots echoing in the cavernous space. He took the radio from Becker and compared it to the one he already held. They were not just similar. They were absolutely identical. Same dimensions, same weight, same component layout visible through the open access panel. Even the serial numbers followed a consecutive pattern that suggested assembly line production with computerized tracking. He set them side by side on a crate and opened both access panels, examining the internal components. "Mein Gott," he breathed. The circuit boards were identical, not approximately the same, not built to the same specification with minor variations. Identical. Every resistor in the exact same position. Every capacitor the exact same value. Every wire the exact same length, following the exact same path through the chassis. This level of standardization required manufacturing processes that Germany simply did not possess, automated assembly with tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter, quality control systems that eliminated human error from the production process. Becker watched him with growing concern. "Herr Hauptmann, is something wrong?" Zimmermann laughed, and the sound had an edge of hysteria to it. "Wrong? No, Feldwebel. Everything is perfectly right. These radios are perfectly manufactured. That is precisely what is wrong." He pointed to the manufacturing stamp on the chassis. "Look at this. Built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York. Production date September 1944. Last month, this radio was designed, manufactured, shipped across an ocean, and delivered to a frontline supply dump in less than 6 weeks. That is impressive," Becker said uncertainly. "Impressive?" Zimmermann repeated flatly. "Yes, I suppose that is one word for it. Let me show you what else is impressive." He walked back to the first crate he had opened and pulled out a component list that had been packed with the radios. Each of these units contains 47 vacuum tubes, 230 resistors, 89 capacitors, and approximately 3 kilometers of wire. The manufacturing stamp indicates this is Model SER 300, and the serial number sequence suggests this particular crate contains units numbered 47,800 through 48,000. Becker's eyes widened as he processed the implications. They had built almost 50,000 of these radios. This model, yes, and if the Americans follow the same standardization practices we see here, there are probably a dozen other models being produced in similar quantities. Zimmermann set down the component list and looked around the warehouse with new understanding. "Do you know how many field radios the German army has? Total, across all fronts?" "I do not, Herr Hauptmann. Neither do I precisely, but I know it is measured in thousands, not tens of thousands. And I know that each one is essentially hand-built by skilled technicians, using components from multiple suppliers, assembled in small batches with significant variations between units. If a German radio breaks in the field, repairing it requires a trained specialist who can identify the specific components used in that particular unit and either repair or replace them with parts that may not be exact matches." He picked up one of the American radios again, turning it over in his hands. "But these are built like consumer products, like the radios people had in their homes before the war. Standardized components, modular design. Any competent technician could repair one using parts from another, and if it is damaged beyond repair, you simply throw it away and get another one from the supply depot, because they are producing them faster than they can be destroyed. Becker was silent for a moment, processing what he was hearing. He was a career soldier, not an engineer, but he understood logistics and supply chains. That would explain why the Americans are always talking on their radio. We intercept their communications constantly. Every squad seems to have a radio. Every tank. Every command post. We thought they were just wasteful, that they had not learned proper radio discipline. They do not need radio discipline, Zimmerman said bitterly. They have so many radios that it does not matter if the enemy intercepts some of their communications. The tactical advantage of perfect coordination at every level outweighs the security concerns. Meanwhile, we are rationing radio equipment, prioritizing communication at battalion level and above, leaving our infantry companies and platoons to rely on runners and field telephones like it is 1918. He walked to another crate and pried it open, finding more radios. Different model, slightly larger, probably for vehicle mounting. He checked the manufacturing stamp. Built by Motorola in Chicago. Production date September 1944. Serial number starting with 23,000. 23,000 of this model alone, all built last month. The numbers were staggering, incomprehensible when compared to German production capacity. We should report this, Becker said quietly. Report what? Zimmerman asked. That the Americans can build radios faster than we can? That their industrial capacity exceeds ours by orders of magnitude? That we are fighting an enemy who treats precision electronics as disposable consumer goods? He laughed again, that same bitter sound. I am sure that will be well received by command. Perhaps they will accuse me of defeatism. Perhaps they will tell me that German quality is superior to American quantity. Perhaps they will remind me that final victory is inevitable because our cause is just... He picked up the first radio again, holding it like Hamlet holding Yorick's skull, contemplating the implications of mortality. Except this was not contemplating death. This was contemplating defeat, understanding in a visceral way that Germany had never had a chance of winning this war. Not because of military tactics or strategic decisions or leadership failures, but because of something more fundamental. The Americans had created an industrial system that could mass-produce complex technology with a quality and efficiency that Germany, even at its peak, had never approached. How many factories do you think they have producing these radios? Zimmerman asked, though he was really asking himself. 10? 20? And how many factories producing tanks, aircraft, trucks, artillery, ammunition, uniforms, boots, every other item necessary to fight a modern war, all running 3 shifts per day, all supplied with unlimited materials, all staffed by workers who are not being bombed or conscripted or starved. He set the radio down gently, almost reverently, as if it were a sacred object rather than a military tool. In a way, it was sacred. It was proof of a truth that cannot be denied or explained away or countered with propaganda. The industrial might of America was not just superior to Germany's, it was overwhelming, crushing, so completely dominant that the outcome of the war had probably been determined the moment the United States entered the conflict. We need to document this, Zimmerman said finally, pulling out his notebook. Photograph every crate. Record every serial number. Document the manufacturing stamps and production dates. Create a complete inventory of everything in this warehouse. Then we compile it into a report that cannot be ignored or dismissed. And then, Becker asked, then we send it up the chain of command and hope that someone with authority has the courage to read it and understand what it means. The documentation took 3 days. Zimmerman worked methodically, photographing each type of equipment, recording serial numbers, analyzing manufacturing stamps and production codes. Becker organized a small team of soldiers to help with the inventory, men who had been pulled from frontline duty for what their officers assumed would be a simple cataloging task. Instead, they found themselves participating in what Zimmerman increasingly viewed as an archaeological expedition, uncovering evidence of civilization so advanced that their own seemed primitive by comparison. On the second day, they found the spare parts crates, dozens of them, organized with precision that made Zimmerman want to weep. Each crate was labeled clearly in English with its contents: vacuum tubes of the SCR, 300 radios, replacement circuit boards, condensers, resistors, wire, batteries, every component needed to maintain and repair the radios in the field, all standardized, all interchangeable, all produced in quantities that suggested the Americans considered supply chain logistics as important as the equipment itself. "Look at this," Zimmerman said, showing Becker a box of vacuum tubes. Each tube was individually wrapped in protective material and fitted into a foam insert that held it securely. The box contained 100 tubes, all identical, all marked with the same production code. "We treat vacuum tubes like precious gems. Each one is hand-tested before installation. If one fails in the field, replacement is a significant undertaking because supplies are limited and prioritized for critical equipment." He set the box down and gestured at the crates around them. "The Americans packed them like commodities, like soap or canned food. They produce them in such quantities that individual tubes are essentially worthless. A radio fails, replace the tube. Still does not work? Replace the circuit board. Still broken? Throw the whole radio away and get another one." Becker picked up one of the wrapped tubes, examining it carefully. "This seems wasteful." "It seems wasteful because we think in terms of scarcity," Zimmerman replied. "We have always operated under the assumption that materials and manufacturing capacity are limited, that every item must be conserved and repaired and used until it absolutely cannot function anymore. But the Americans operate under different assumptions. For them, the limiting factor is not manufacturing capacity, but logistics. They can build anything they want in almost unlimited quantity. The challenge is getting it where it needs to be." He walked to a large crate they had opened that morning and pulled out a thick manual. It was a technical guide for the SCR 300 radio, printed on good quality paper with clear diagrams and step-by-step instructions for operation, maintenance, and field repair. The manual was perhaps 200 pages long, professionally bound, with a plastic cover to protect it from moisture and rough handling. "This is a manual for a field radio," Zimmerman said, showing it to Becker. "Look at the production quality. Look at the detail. Every procedure is documented with photographs and diagrams. Every component is identified with its proper technical designation and part number. There is even a troubleshooting section with common problems and solutions, written in language that assumes the user is not an electrical engineer." He flipped through the pages, his engineering eye noting the careful layout, the logical organization, the obvious effort that had gone into making the information accessible to ordinary soldiers. "Do you know what the German equivalent looks like? It is a 20-page technical bulletin, printed on cheap paper, distributed to signals units at battalion level. It assumes the reader has extensive technical training and access to specialized test equipment. And if we need more copies, they must be manually typed and duplicated because our printing capacity is devoted to propaganda materials." Becker sat down on a crate, the weight of what they were discovering finally settling on him. "You are saying we cannot win because we cannot produce manuals?" "I am saying we cannot win because the manuals are a symptom," Zimmerman replied. "The Americans have industrialized everything, not just manufacturing, but training, maintenance, supply chain management, technical documentation. They have created systems that allow semi-skilled workers to perform tasks that would require years of training in the German army. They have made complexities simple through standardization and organization." On the third day, they found something that disturbed Zimmerman even more than the radios. It was a crate of tools specifically designed for radio maintenance. The set included screwdrivers, pliers, wire cutters, soldering equipment, testing meters, and various other instruments. Each tool was clearly labeled with its intended use. Each had a designated slot in a foam-lined case that made it obvious if something was missing. And each tool was manufactured to a quality standard that exceeded anything Zimmerman had seen in German military equipment. He picked up a pair of needle-nose pliers and examined them in the light from the warehouse windows. The steel was high quality, properly tempered. The grips were comfortable and ergonomically designed. The jaws met precisely along their entire length, indicating careful manufacturing and quality control. He opened and closed them several times, feeling the smooth action at the pivot point, noting the complete absence of play or binding. "These are better tools than I had in my laboratory at the university before the war," he said quietly, "and the Americans are giving them to ordinary soldiers for field maintenance, not to specialists, not to trained technicians, but to anyone who might need to repair a radio in combat conditions." He set the pliers back in their designated slot and looked at the complete tool set. There were perhaps 30 pieces, each one manufactured to the same high standard, each one representing an investment in capability that the German military could not match. Multiply this by the thousands or tens of thousands of sets that must exist across the American military, and the investment became staggering. Yet the Americans did it because they understood something fundamental. Good tools enable good work, and good work multiplied combat effectiveness. "We need to finish this report," Zimmerman said, closing the tool case. "I want to have it completed before we lose access to this warehouse." That concern proved prescient. On the fourth day, as Zimmerman was writing his conclusions, an SS officer arrived with orders to evacuate the warehouse. American forces had broken through German lines to the west and were advancing rapidly. Everything of value needed to be loaded onto trucks and moved east before the position was overrun. The SS officer, an Obersturmführer named Klaus Hartmann, was not interested in Zimmerman's documentation project. "Load the weapons and ammunition first," Hartmann ordered. "Medical supplies second. Communications equipment third, if there is room. Everything else gets left behind. This equipment needs to be studied," Zimmerman protested. "The intelligence value alone justifies." "Intelligence value?" Hartmann interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "We are fighting a war, Hauptmann, not conducting academic research. The Americans are 10 kilometers away and advancing. We need weapons to stop them, not reports about their manufacturing processes." Zimmerman felt anger rising in his chest, hot and immediate. "You do not understand what we have found here. This is not just equipment. This is evidence of industrial capability that makes our entire war effort futile. If command understood, command understands perfectly well what we face," Hartmann snapped. "What they need from you is to load those trucks, not to write defeatist reports about American superiority. Now follow your orders, or I will find someone who will." For a moment, Zimmerman considered refusing, considered explaining in detail what he had discovered, forcing this arrogant SS officer to confront the reality that Germany was not losing because of inferior leadership or inadequate spirit, but because of simple, unavoidable industrial mathematics. But he saw in Hartmann's eyes the dangerous certainty of a true believer, someone for whom questioning the inevitable victory was not just wrong but treasonous. "Yes, Obersturmführer," Zimmerman said quietly, swallowing his anger and frustration. "They loaded what they could onto the available trucks, weapons and ammunition as ordered, medical supplies, a few crates of the American radios, selected almost at random because there was no time for careful evaluation. Everything else remained in the warehouse, including most of Zimmerman's documentation, his photographs, his carefully compiled evidence of American industrial supremacy. He managed to keep his written notes, stuffing them into his map case before Hartmann could confiscate them. As they drove east, ahead of the American advance, Zimmerman sat in the back of a supply truck, surrounded by crates of captured equipment. He pulled out his notes and read through them one more time, committing the key facts to memory in case the physical documentation was lost or destroyed. 50,000 radios of one model alone. Production dates showing manufacturing rates that exceeded Germany's total monthly output. Quality control that eliminated variations between units. Spare parts produced in quantities that assumed routine replacement rather than careful conservation. Tool sets that enable field maintenance by non-specialists. Technical manuals that democratize complex knowledge. Each fact was individually interesting, but collectively devastating. They added up to a picture of industrial capacity so vast that it made German production look artisanal by comparison. And if the Americans could do this with radios, they were surely doing it with everything else. Tanks, aircraft, ships, artillery, trucks, every instrument of modern warfare, all produced with the same mass production efficiency, all supplied to military units with the same casual abundance. "Where are you riding?" asked one of the soldiers sharing the truck bed, a young private who looked barely old enough to shave. "A report," Zimmerman replied, "about what we found in that warehouse. Was it valuable?" Zimmerman looked at the young soldier, at his earnest face and innocent eyes, and wondered if he should tell him the truth, that they had found evidence of Germany's inevitable defeat, that the war was already lost, had probably been lost from the beginning, and that every day of continued fighting was simply adding to the butcher's bill without changing the ultimate outcome. "Very valuable," he said instead. "Very valuable indeed." Zimmerman's report reached Army Group headquarters 3 weeks later, passed up the chain of command through channels that normally consumed such documents without trace. He had rewritten it twice, each time moderating his conclusions, removing language that could be construed as defeatist while retaining the essential facts. The final version was a dry technical analysis of captured American communications equipment with detailed specifications and manufacturing data. Only in the concluding paragraphs did he allow himself to state what should have been obvious to anyone reading the numbers. The scale and quality of American production indicated industrial capabilities that Germany could not match. The response came in the form of an unexpected summons. Zimmerman was ordered to report to a civilian technical assessment bureau in Berlin, a department he had never heard of despite his years in signals work. The travel authorization came with unusual priority codes that ensured him space on military transport despite the chaos of a collapsing front. Someone important wanted to talk to him, and that realization filled him with equal parts hope and dread. Berlin in November 1944 was a city dying by degrees. Allied bombing had transformed whole districts into landscapes of rubble and exposed basements. Buildings that still stood wore their damage like scars, windows boarded over, walls shored up with timber, roofs covered with tarpaulins. People moved through the streets with the numbed expressions of those who had endured too much for too long. Yet the machinery of the Reich continued functioning, orders still flowed, departments still operated, and somewhere in this wounded city, someone wanted to discuss American radios. The address took him to a nondescript office building in a district that had so far escaped the worst of the bombing. Guards at the entrance checked his papers with a thorough paranoia that characterized all official interactions in the late war period. He was directed to the third floor, to an office suite that had once belonged to some commercial enterprise, but now housed what appeared to be a hybrid military-civilian technical analysis group. The man who greeted him was perhaps 60, with iron gray hair and precise bearing of an academic. He introduced himself as Dr. Heinrich Wolf, formerly a professor of industrial engineering at the Technical University of Berlin, now attached to the Armaments Ministry in some undefined capacity. His office was cluttered with reports, technical drawings, and sample equipment from various allied nations. On his desk sat one of the American SCR, 300 radios, partially disassembled, its components laid out with the care of a surgeon examining a patient. Hauptmann Zimmerman, Wolf said, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming. Your report made for fascinating reading. Also deeply disturbing reading, but fascinating nonetheless." Zimmerman sat, unsure how to respond. Wolf's tone was conversational, almost academic, completely at odds with the military formality he had expected. "I have been studying American industrial production for 3 years now," Wolf continued, settling into his own chair behind the desk. "Analyzing captured equipment, reading their technical journals when we can obtain them, interviewing prisoners who worked in their factories. Your report, Hauptmann, is the most comprehensive assessment of their manufacturing capabilities that I have seen from a field officer. Most reports focus on what the equipment does. Yours focus on how it was made. That shows genuine understanding." "Thank you, Herr Doctor," Zimmerman replied carefully. "I try to provide context that might be useful for our own production efforts." Wolf smiled, but there was sadness in it. A diplomatic answer. "But we are past the point where diplomacy serves any useful purpose. Let me be direct. Your report confirms what some of us have known for years. Germany cannot win an industrial war against the United States. We never could. The disparity in manufacturing capacity is simply too vast." Zimmerman felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying since that warehouse in Aachen. Here, finally, was someone willing to speak the truth plainly. Then why are we still fighting? "Because stopping is not a decision that field officers or a technical analyst can make," Wolf replied. "Wars end when political leadership accepts defeat or when the military capacity to resist is exhausted. We are approaching the latter, but slowly, and thousands will die in the interim." He picked up a vacuum tube from the disassembled radio on his desk, holding it to the light. "Do you know how many vacuum tubes Germany produced last year?" "I do not have exact figures. Approximately 12 million tubes across all types and applications. Military radios, radar systems, industrial equipment, whatever still operates that requires electronics. It sounds like a large number until you learn that the Americans produced 300 million vacuum tubes last year. 300 million. 25 times our output. And their tubes are better, more reliable, more standardized, produced with automated equipment that we lack and cannot build because we lack the machine tools to build the machines that build the tubes." Wolf set the tube down. and looked directly at Zimmerman. "This is why I wanted to meet you, not to discuss your report, but to ask what you plan to do with this knowledge. You understand the implications. You've seen the evidence. You know that continued resistance is futile from an industrial standpoint. How does one continue serving knowing that every order executed, every mission completed, every small victory achieved changes nothing about the ultimate outcome?" It was a question Zimmerman had been avoiding since that warehouse, the question that haunted his sleep and colored every interaction with his men. He thought about how to answer, about what was safe to say versus what was true. "I teach them to survive," he said finally. "My men, I cannot change strategic reality, but I can help them live through today and tomorrow. I teach tactics that account for American material superiority. I help them understand what they face without crushing their morale. I do my duty as an officer while accepting that our collective duty serves a cause that is already lost." Wolf nodded slowly. A pragmatic answer, perhaps the only answer available to decent men trapped in indecent circumstances. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet, from which he extracted a thick folder. "I want to show you something. These are production analyses from multiple sources, compiled over the past 2 years. American tank production, aircraft production, ship construction, ammunition manufacturing, all documented with the same attention to detail you showed in your report." He spread documents across the desk, each one a small window into American industrial capacity. Monthly production figures that exceeded annual German targets. Factories that operated at scales Germany had never contemplated. Supply chains that moved resources across continents with efficiency that German logistics could not match over distances of a few hundred kilometers. The numbers were staggering, overwhelming, conclusive. In 1943, the Americans produced 47,000 combat aircraft, Wolf said, pointing to one document. Germany produced 25,000. In 1944, they will exceed 80,000 aircraft. We might reach 40,000 if the bombing does not worsen. They are outproducing us by ratios that make military victory mathematically impossible, regardless of tactical skill or strategic brilliance. He pulled out another document, this one showing tank production. Sherman tanks. They built 49,000 of them last year. 49,000. We built 9,000 Panthers and Tigers combined, and we consider that a major achievement. They treat tanks the way we treat rifles, as mass-produced items to be issued in quantity and replaced when destroyed. Zimmerman studied the documents, his engineering mind automatically calculating the implications, replacement rates, attrition tolerance, the ability to absorb losses that would cripple German formations and continue offensive operations without pause. It was not war as he had been taught to understand it. It was industrial production applied to military force, victory achieved through overwhelming material superiority rather than tactical excellence. "Why are you showing me this?" Zimmerman asked. "Because you understand it," Wolf replied. "Most officers cannot process information that contradicts their beliefs about German superiority. They see these numbers and dismiss them as enemy propaganda or exaggeration. But you have engineering training. You understand industrial processes. You can look at a mass-produced radio and understand what it represents about the society that created it. That makes you valuable. Valuable for what purpose?" Wolf returned to his chair, his expression grave. "There are those of us, scattered through various departments and agencies, who are trying to document the reality of Germany's situation, not for propaganda purposes, not to undermine the war effort, but to create a historical record that might survive the collapse. When this regime falls, when the trials and recriminations begin, someone needs to be able to explain how this happened, how an advanced industrial nation committed itself to a war it could not win against opponents it could not match." He gestured at the documents covering his desk. "These analyses will be part of that record. Your report will be part of it. Other documents from other observers, all painting a picture of industrial reality that was ignored or suppressed because it contradicted ideological assumption. We are not trying to end the war. We are simply trying to ensure that the truth survives it." Zimmerman felt the weight of what Wolf was asking. Contributing to this archive meant accepting that he was working toward a post-war future where Germany had lost, where the Reich had collapsed, where everything they had fought for had failed. It meant abandoning the pretense of belief in final victory and instead preparing for defeat. It was not treason exactly, but it existed in a moral space that was uncomfortably close. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. Continue what you are already doing, Wolf replied. Document what you observe. Write honest technical assessments. When you encounter American equipment, analyze it with the same rigor you showed at Aachen. Send the reports through normal channels, but also send copies to me through a separate channel I will provide. Some of them will be buried or ignored. Others might actually influence tactical decisions, but all of them will be preserved for the historical record. Zimmerman nodded slowly. It was not a dramatic act of resistance, not a heroic gesture that would change the course of the war. It was simply the decision to bear witness, to document truth in an environment saturated with lies. Perhaps that was all that decent men could do in such circumstances. Bear witness and hope that someone, someday, would care about the truth. I will do it, he said. Zimmerman returned to his unit 2 days later, carrying encrypted contact information for Wolf and a burden of knowledge that felt heavier than any physical weight. The front had moved during his absence, pushed steadily eastward by American and British forces that seemed to have unlimited replacements for every loss. His signals company had been pulled back to defensive positions near Cologne, tasked with maintaining communications for a division that existed more on paper than in reality. Losses had been replaced with old men and boys, with soldiers pulled from rear echelon duties, with anyone who could hold a rifle and follow basic orders. The American advance had slowed as winter deepened and supply lines stretched, but everyone knew the pause was temporary. Come spring, the offensive would resume with fresh troops and unlimited material, and the thin German lines would crack under pressure that could not be resisted or even meaningfully delayed. The question was not whether Germany would lose, but how many more would die before the inevitable end. Zimmerman threw himself into his work with renewed purpose. He trained his men on American equipment they might encounter or capture, teaching them to recognize the manufacturing quality that indicated limitless resources. He wrote technical assessments of every piece of Allied equipment that came into his hands, analyzing not just capabilities, but the industrial processes that created them. And he sent duplicates of everything to Wolf through the covert channel that had been established, contributing to an archive that might outlive the regime it documented. In December, they captured an American supply truck that had strayed too far ahead of its unit. The vehicle itself was impressive, a 6-wheel drive design with excellent cross-country capability. But what interested Zimmerman more was its cargo, food rations and waterproof packaging, medical supplies in quantities that suggested routine distribution rather than careful rationing, spare parts for vehicles and weapons, all standardized and interchangeable, and more radios, these ones newer models with features that the ones from Aachen had lacked. He examined one of the new radios with Becker, who had become something of an informal assistant in these investigations. The design showed incremental improvements over the earlier model, small refinements that suggested continuous development and testing, better weather sealing, more robust components, simplified controls that made operation even easier. It was a kind of evolutionary improvement that only came from large-scale production and extensive field testing. They are still improving the design, Zimmerman observed. Even though the war is nearly won, even though what they've already works well, they continue to refine and enhance. This is not desperation or crisis manufacturing. This is systematic industrial development with resources to spare for optimization. Becker had grown accustomed to these analytical monologues, understanding that Zimmerman was not just examining equipment, but trying to comprehend the mindset of the society that produced it. What does the improvement tell you? That they think long-term even in the midst of war. German development has stopped. We are focused entirely on immediate needs, on getting weapons into the field regardless of quality or sustainability. The Americans are thinking about what comes after this war, about systems that will continue to be useful in whatever conflicts follow. They are building for a future they are confident they will see. He wrote up his analysis that night by candlelight, the power in their sector having failed hours earlier. The report was detailed and technical, focusing on the incremental improvements and what they suggested about American development processes. He sent the official version through standard channels and a more candid version to Wolf, including observations about German development failures and the implications for post-war industrial recovery. In January, the American winter offensive began, and Zimmerman's world contracted to a desperate series of retreats and delaying actions. His signals company spent more time running communication wire and destroying equipment they could not carry than they spent actually maintaining communications. The division they supported was dissolving. Units scattered and reformed and scattered again as the American advance continued its inexorable push eastward. During a brief respite in a half-destroyed village, Zimmerman found himself sharing a cellar with a group of infantry officers, all of them exhausted and running on adrenaline and the last reserves of professional discipline. One of them, a young lieutenant named Peter Hoffman, had been a law student before conscription. He sat cleaning his pistol with mechanical precision while discussing the legal implications of surrender. They say the Americans treat prisoners well. Hoffman said to no one in particular, according to Geneva Convention rules, food, medical care, no torture. Some men in my company are talking about surrendering at the next engagement. I cannot blame them. What are we fighting for anymore? An older Hauptmann named Weber, no relation to the SS soldier Zimmerman had met at Villers-Bocage, looked up sharply. We fight because those are our orders, because we are soldiers, because surrendering means abandoning your comrades. Does it? Hoffman challenged. Or does continuing to fight mean forcing them to die for a cause that is already lost? At what point does duty become complicity in meaningless slaughter? The question hung in the air, dangerous and tempting. Zimmerman knew he should change the subject, reassert military discipline, remind them that such talk could be construed as defeatism. But he was tired of pretending, tired of maintaining fictions that no one really believed. I saw a warehouse full of American radios once, he said quietly. Thousands of them, all identical, all perfectly manufactured, all produced in a single month. That is, when I understood we could never win. Not because we lacked courage or skill, but because we were fighting an opponent with industrial capabilities so vast that our best efforts were insignificant by comparison. The officers looked at him with expressions ranging from shock to relief. He had given voice to what many of them suspected, but had not dared to articulate. Weber opened his mouth to object, to reassert the necessity of belief and discipline, but no words came. What could he say that would counter the evidence of their own experiences? They had all seen the American material superiority. They had all watched German positions overwhelmed not by better tactics, but by greater firepower. They all knew that the next offensive would be unstoppable, and the one after that, and the one after that, until there was nothing left to defend. So what do we do? Hoffman asked. Surrender? Fight until we are killed? Run? We survive, Zimmerman replied. We do our duty as officers to the men who depend on us. We make tactical decisions that minimize casualties while fulfilling our orders, and we document what we have seen so that, when this is over, someone will understand what happened here. They sat in silence after that, each man contemplating his own path forward. Some would die in the coming weeks. Others would be captured. A few would survive to see the war's end and face the reckoning that would follow. But in that moment, in that cellar, they were simply soldiers trying to reconcile duty with reality, honor with survival, loyalty with the growing certainty that they served a doomed cause. The war ground on through February and into March. Zimmerman continued his work, maintaining communications when possible, documenting American equipment when he encountered it, sending reports to Wolf that detailed not just technical specifications, but the industrial philosophy they represented. Each report was an act of preservation, an attempt to ensure that the lessons of Germany's defeat would not be lost in the chaos of collapse. In April, as Soviet forces closed on Berlin from the east and American forces advanced from the west, Zimmerman's unit finally dissolved completely. The division they supported ceased to exist as a coherent organization, its remnants absorbed into emergency battle groups formed from whoever could still hold a weapon. Zimmerman found himself attached to a makeshift headquarters in a small town that would be overrun within days, maintaining radio contact with units that often did not respond because they had been destroyed or had already surrendered. On the last day, he burned his official papers but kept the copies of reports he had sent to Wolf, hiding them in a waterproof case that he buried near the headquarters building. Someday, if he survived, he would retrieve them. If he did not survive, perhaps someone else would find them and understand what they represented. A record of truth in a time of lies. Evidence of industrial reality in a society built on ideological fantasy. Documentation of how a nation had committed itself to a war it could never win against an opponent it could never match. When the Americans arrived, Zimmerman surrendered with a handful of soldiers who remained. The American officer who processed them was businesslike and professional, following procedures that had clearly been refined through processing thousands of prisoners. Zimmerman noted the radio the American carried, a newer model than any he had examined before, compact and efficient. Even now, even at the moment of victory, the Americans were still improving their equipment, still thinking systematically about communications and logistics and all the mundane details that determine success in modern war. "You speak English?" the American officer asked. "Yes," Zimmerman replied. "I was an engineer before the war. Electrical system. We need technical personnel for assessment work." "You interested in helping evaluate German equipment?" It was ironic, Zimmerman thought. He had spent years analyzing American equipment to understand German weakness. Now he would analyze German equipment to help the Americans understand what they had defeated. But perhaps that was appropriate. Perhaps bearing witness worked both ways, documenting not just the victor's strengths but the vanquished failures. "Yes," he said, "I am interested." In the years that followed, Zimmerman would work with Allied technical assessment teams, examining German equipment and industrial processes, explaining what had worked and what had failed and why. He would retrieve his buried reports and see them added to official archives. He would read Wolff's industrial analyses, which had survived the collapse and were used in post-war studies of German production failures. And he would occasionally hold one of those American radios, those mass-produced instruments of industrial supremacy, and remember the moment in that warehouse in Aachen when he first understood that Germany had never had a chance of winning the war it had started. The truth had been written in manufacturing stamps and production dates, in standardized components and interchangeable parts, in the casual abundance of society that treated precision electronics as disposable consumer goods. It had been there all along for anyone willing to see it. Germany had lost the war not on battlefields, but in factories, not through lack of courage, but through industrial insufficiency, not because of individual failures, but because of systemic limitations that ideology could not overcome and propaganda could not disguise. And sometimes late at night, Zimmerman would wonder how many lives could have been saved if someone in authority had been willing to read the evidence those radios represented and accept the implications. But that was a counterfactual history, a what-if that existed only in imagination. The reality was that tens of thousands had died after the outcome was already determined, sacrificed to maintain illusions that served political purposes rather than military necessity. The radios were simply evidence of a truth that had come too late to matter. The collapse of Nazi Germany was determined not by single battles, but by fundamental industrial imbalances that made Allied victory inevitable once the full weight of American production was brought to bear. If you want to explore more stories of how industrial capacity shaped the outcome of World War II, subscribe to join us as we examine the economic and technological factors that determined which nations would triumph and which would fall.